In the quiet village of St. Mary Mead, a priceless antique mirror vanishes from Ashfield Hall, leaving no trace but suspicion. Was it the reserved butler, hiding a shadowed past? The gossipy widow, seeing more than she admits? The sharp-tongued decorator, with an eye for beauty? Or the obsessive collector, whose passion knows no bounds? Enter Miss Jane Marple, whose keen eye unravels a web of secrets, scuff marks, a hidden cart, a smudge of earth, leading to a daring theft and a shocking confession. In just one night, a mirror's reflection reveals the heart of a crime. Chapter 1. The Vanishing Reflection. The morning mist clung to the hedgerows of St. Mary Mead, softening the outlines of its thatched cottages and the imposing silhouette of Ashfield Hall. The Manor, a Georgian edifice of weathered stone and ivy, had long been the pride of Colonel Arthur Bantry, whose family had owned it for generations. Its latest treasure, an antique mirror of rare craftsmanship, had arrived only a fortnight ago, its gilded frame adorned with delicate acanthus leaves that caught the candlelight in the grand hallway. The village had buzzed with whispers of its value. Some said it once graced a French chateau. But on this particular October morning, the mirror was the subject of a different kind of talk. Miss Jane Marple, ensconced in her cottage parlor, was knitting a pale blue shawl, her fingers moving with the quiet precision of habit. The fire crackled softly, and the scent of lavender from her garden drifted through the open window. She was not surprised when the door burst open, admitting Mrs. Dolly Bantry, her cheeks flushed and her hat slightly askew. "Jane, it's dreadful," Dolly exclaimed, collapsing into a chintz-covered armchair. "The mirror, Arthur's precious mirror, stolen, gone in the night without a trace." Miss Marple's needles paused, and her mild blue eyes met Dolly's with a spark of interest. "Stolen, you say? From the hallway?" She set her knitting aside, gesturing to the teapot. "Pour yourself a cup, Dolly, and tell me everything. Slowly, now." Dolly, still breathless, recounted the morning's chaos. The housemaid, Ellen, had noticed the absence first, her polishing cloth idle before the bare wall. The mirror, nearly 6 feet tall and heavy as a man, had hung between two stern portraits of Bantry ancestors. No glass littered the floor, no windows were forced, and the front door's lock remained untouched. "Arthur's in a state," Dolly said, stirring her tea absently. "He paid a fortune at auction, you know, and now the police are tramping about, finding nothing. Inspector Craddock's coming this afternoon, but I thought, well, Jane, you've a way with these things." Miss Marple smiled faintly, her mind already turning. "A mirror of such size," she mused, "is not easily spirited away. It would require strength, care, and no small amount of nerve. Who was in the house last night, Dolly?" Dolly sipped her tea, gathering her thoughts. "Well, there's Grayson, the butler. He's newish, 6 months with us, very proper but a bit reserved. Then Mrs. Wentworth, Clara, that widow from London, staying for the week. She's all chatter and morning veils, though I suspect she enjoys the drama. Miss Lyle, the decorator, was there too, fussing over curtains and paint swatches for the library, and Mr. Voss, that antique collector, came for dinner. Oh, Jane, he went on about the mirror, said it was a Regency masterpiece." Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. "Mr. Voss, you say? And what sort of man is he?" "Odd," Dolly replied, wrinkling her nose. "Polished, mind you, but too intense. He kept staring at the mirror during dinner, as if he could see through it. Left about 9:30, I think. Arthur walked him to the door. And the others? Miss Marple pressed gently. Where were they after dinner? Dolly frowned. Grayson was clearing the table, I suppose. Clara, Mrs. Wentworth, went to her room to write letters. Miss Lyle was sketching in the library, or so she said. By 10, the house was quiet, and Grayson locked up as usual. Miss Marple leaned back, her hands folded neatly. A mirror, she said softly, reflects what is before it, but it keeps its own counsel. Whoever took it knew its worth and the house's ways. I shall come to Ashfield Hall tomorrow, Dolly, if Arthur permits. A little observation may clarify matters. Dolly's face brightened. Oh, Jane, you're a marvel. Arthur will grumble, but he'll agree. He always says you see things others miss. She rose, adjusting her hat. I must get back. Arthur's probably shouting at the constable by now. As the door closed behind her friend, Miss Marple picked up her knitting, her thoughts weaving a pattern as intricate as her stitches. A stolen mirror, a house full of strangers, and a village that held its secrets close. She had seen such patterns before, in the glances of neighbors or the silences of tea parties. People, she murmured to herself, are so very careless with their reflections. Chapter 2. The Cast of Characters. The sun had barely crested the rolling hills of St. Mary Mead when Miss Jane Marple stepped out of her cottage, her black handbag tucked under one arm and a woolen scarf draped neatly over her shoulders. The village was stirring. Mrs. Price at the post office was sweeping her stoop, and the milkman's cart rattled along the lane. But Miss Marple's thoughts were fixed on Ashfield Hall and the curious matter of the vanished mirror. Dolly Bantry's breathless account had piqued her interest, not merely for the theft itself, but for the people entangled in it. In her experience, objects did not vanish without human hands, and those hands often betrayed their owners in the smallest of ways. She arrived at the Manor just as the clock in the village square chimed 10. The gravel drive crunched under, her sensible shoes and the great oak door of Ashfield Hall loomed before her, its brass knocker gleaming in the morning light. Dolly greeted her at the threshold, her face a mixture of relief and agitation. "Jane, you're a saint to come so quickly," she said, ushering her friend inside. "Arthur's in the study, grumbling about insurance papers, and the police are poking about the garden as if the mirror might be buried under the roses." Miss Marple's lips curved into a gentle smile. "Let them poke, Dolly. The garden may yield nothing, but people always leave traces elsewhere. Now, tell me more about those who were here last night. I want every detail you can recall." They settled in the morning room, a cozy space with chintz curtains and a view of the lawn. A tray of tea and scones awaited, and Dolly, ever the attentive hostess, poured a cup as she began. "Well, Jane, it's a small enough group, but each one's peculiar in their own way. Let's start with Grayson, the butler. He's been with us since spring. Recommended by an agency in London. Terribly efficient. Polishes the silver until it blinds you, and he knows exactly how Arthur likes his brandy poured. But there's something about him, Jane. He's so contained. Never a word out of place, never a smile that reaches his eyes. I sometimes wonder what he's thinking behind that starched collar." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her expression attentive but unreadable. "A butler's discretion is his trade, Dolly, but too much of it can hide more than it reveals. What do you know of his past?" Dolly frowned, spreading jam on a scone. "Precious little. He's from Yorkshire, I think, and worked for a baronet before us. Lost a fiancée some years back. Poor man mentioned it once, when I asked about a photograph in his room. But he's not one for chatter. Always in the right place at the right time, though. Last night he served dinner, cleared the table, and locked up by 10, as he always does. Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing away the detail of the photograph. And Mrs. Wentworth, the widow, you said? Oh, Clara Wentworth. Dolly's eyes sparkled with the relish of gossip. She's a guest, staying for a week while her London flat is redecorated. A widow of some means. Her husband was in shipping, I believe, left her quite comfortable. She's all size and black lace, but she loves to talk. Over dinner she prattled on about the season in London, who's marrying whom, and how the mirror was divinely elegant, but dreadfully out of place in a country hall. She was in her room after dinner, writing letters, or so she said. But Jane, I caught her lingering in the hallway earlier that day, staring at the mirror as if it might speak to her. Miss Marple's needles, which she had retrieved from her bag, clicked softly as she began a new row. A widow's mourning can be a costume, Dolly, as much as a butler's reserve. Did she seem covetous of the mirror? Dolly tilted her head. Not exactly. Curious, perhaps. She asked Arthur where he'd got it, and when he mentioned the auction, she said something about collectors paying fortunes for such things. But she's not the type to steal, Jane. She's too fond of being seen as respectable. Respectability, Miss Marple murmured, is a marvelous cloak. And the decorator, Miss Lyle? Dolly's face tightened. Felicity Lyle. She's been here 3 weeks, overseeing the library's renovation. Young, sharp, and far too modern for my taste. Always sketching or arguing about colors. Arthur nearly sacked her when she suggested painting the paneling white. She's got an eye for art, I'll give her that, and she was fascinated by the mirror. Kept saying it deserved a grander setting. She was in the library last night, working late, though I didn't see her after 9. She's got a temper, Jane, and no patience for fools, which makes her rather tiring. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. A woman with opinions is often misunderstood. Did she speak of the mirror to anyone else? To Mr. Voss, during dinner, Dolly replied. They had quite a chat about its provenance. French, Regency, all that. She said it ought to be in a gallery, and he agreed, though he looked at it like a man in love. Oh, Jane, Mr. Voss is the oddest of the lot. Miss Marple leaned forward slightly. Tell me about him. Reginald Voss, Dolly said, lowering her voice as if the man might overhear. An antique collector from London, here to catalogue some of Arthur's old furniture for an auction house. He's thin as a rake, with a mustache you could hang a hat on, and eyes that don't blink enough. He dined with us last night, and all he could talk about was the mirror, its gilding, its history, how it was wasted in a hallway. He offered to buy it, Jane, right there at the table. Arthur laughed it off, but Voss looked positively wounded. He left about 9:30, walked back to the village inn where he's staying. Alone, he said. Miss Marple's needles paused. Alone, she repeated softly. A collector's passion can be a dangerous thing, Dolly. Did he seem agitated when he left? Dolly considered this. Not agitated exactly, determined perhaps. He kept glancing at the mirror as he put on his coat, and he said something strange. Beauty like that deserves to be cherished. I thought it was just his way, but now I wonder. The room fell silent, save for the ticking of the mantel clock and the faint clatter of a constable's boots in the hall. Miss Marple's mind was a whirl of impressions. Grayson's reserve, Mrs. Wentworth's curiosity, Miss Lyle's boldness, and Voss's obsession. Each was a thread in a tapestry she could not yet see, but she knew from long experience that the smallest snag could unravel the whole. "Dolly," she said at last, "I should like to meet these people, myself. A conversation, however brief, reveals more than a dozen police reports. And the hallway, may I see it?" Dolly sprang up, eager to be useful. "Of course, the police have finished there, though they found nothing. Come along, Jane." The hallway of Ashfield Hall was a grand affair, its oak-paneled walls adorned with portraits of stern bantries gazing down from their gilded frames. The space where the mirror had hung was marked by a faint outline of dust and 4 small screw holes, barely noticeable unless one looked closely. Miss Marple bent forward, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. "No damage," she murmured. "The screws were removed with care, not torn out. Whoever took it knew what they were doing." Dolly shivered. "It's eerie, Jane. That mirror was so heavy, Arthur needed 2 footmen to hang it. How could someone carry it off without a sound?" Miss Marple straightened, her gaze lingering on the floor. The polished boards were pristine, but a faint scuff near the baseboard caught her eye. A mark so slight it might have been made by a shoe, or something else entirely. "Strength and silence," she said thoughtfully. "A combination that requires planning. Tell me, Dolly, was the hallway lit last night?" "Only by the chandelier," Dolly replied. "Grayson dims it after dinner, and the servants' lamps are kept low. Anyone moving about would have needed a torch, I suppose." Miss Marple nodded, filing this away. "And the windows, any near the mirror?" Dolly gestured to a tall sash window at the end of the hall, its latch secure. "All locked, Jane. Grayson checks them nightly. The police looked for marks outside, but the gravel's too loose to hold footprints." Miss Marple's eyes followed the line of the window to the ceiling, where a faint cobweb swayed in a draught. "A house this old has many corners," she said, "and corners hide secrets. I think, Dolly, I shall speak with Grayson first. A butler sees everything, even when he pretends not to." They returned to the morning room just as Grayson himself appeared, carrying a fresh pot of tea. He was a man of middle age, tall and lean, with dark hair slicked back and eyes that seemed to take in the room without ever meeting one's gaze. His black suit was immaculate, his movements precise as he set the pot down. "Will there be anything else, Mrs. Bantry?" he asked, his voice smooth and devoid of inflection. Dolly hesitated, but Miss Marple spoke up, her tone mild. "Mr. Grayson, you were the last to lock up last night, I understand?" He inclined his head. "Yes, ma'am, at 10 o'clock, as is my custom. The house was secure." "And you noticed nothing unusual?" Miss Marple's eyes were gentle but piercing. "No sounds, no shadows out of place?" Grayson's face remained impassive. "None, ma'am. The household was quiet. I retired to my quarters after checking the doors and windows." Miss Marple smiled, as if satisfied. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson. You must have a keen eye keeping such a large house in order." He bowed slightly and withdrew, but Miss Marple's smile faded as the door closed. "A keen eye indeed," she murmured to Dolly. "But what does it choose to see?" The morning wore on, and Miss Marple requested to meet the others. Mrs. Wentworth was next, sweeping into the room in a rustle of black silk, her face framed by a lace cap that seemed more theatrical than mournful. "Miss Marple," she exclaimed, extending a gloved hand. "Dolly's told me of your cleverness. Such a dreadful business, this theft. That mirror was the talk of the village, you know." Miss Marple's handshake was brief. her attention on the widow's animated expression. "You admired it, Mrs. Wentworth." "Oh, immensely," Clara replied, settling onto the sofa. "Such elegance. I told Colonel Bantry it was wasted here, where no one but the servants sees it." Mr. Voss agreed. He said it belonged in a grand collection, not a drafty hall. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. "You spoke with Mr. Voss about it?" "At dinner," Clara said, her eyes bright with recollection. "He was quite passionate, went on about the gilding, the craftsmanship. Miss Lyle joined in, though she was rather rude, saying the mirror clashed with the hall's decor. I stayed out of it, of course. I was in my room by 9, writing to my cousin in Bath." Miss Marple nodded, her mind noting the widow's eagerness to distance herself from the evening's events. "And you heard nothing later? No footsteps, no creaks?" Clara's smile faltered. "Well, the house is old, isn't it? Always creaking, but nothing out of the ordinary. I was asleep by 11. Miss Marple thanked her, and Mrs. Wentworth departed, leaving a faint scent of lavender behind. Dolly leaned forward. "What do you think, Jane? She's all talk, but is she hiding something?" "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice soft. "Or perhaps she sees only what flatters her. Let us meet Miss Lyle next." Felicity Lyle entered with a brisk step, her auburn hair pinned loosely and a sketchbook tucked under her arm. She was younger than Miss Marple had expected, with sharp green eyes and a manner that suggested impatience with pleasantries. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," she said, nodding curtly. "I suppose you're here about the mirror. I had nothing to do with it." Miss Marple's smile was disarming. "No one suggests you did, Miss Lyle, but you have an artist's eye. What did you think of the mirror?" Felicity's expression softened slightly. It was stunning. Regency, French, probably from a noble house. The gilding was flawless, though it was hung atrociously, too low, and the light made it glare. I told Colonel Bantry it needed a better frame, figuratively speaking. Mr. Voss thought it should be in a museum, and I agreed. "You spoke with him at length?" "Miss," Marple asked. "Enough," Felicity said, shrugging. "He's a collector, knows his stuff. We talked during dinner, but I was in the library by 9, sketching plans for the chandelier. I didn't see the mirror after that." Miss Marple noted the decorator's steady hands, marked by faint ink stains. "You worked late, then?" "Until 10, Felicity replied. "Then I went to bed. This house is a nightmare to redecorate. Colonel Bantry fights every change." Miss Marple thanked her, and Felicity left, her sketchbook clutched tightly. Dolly sighed. "She's so prickly, Jane. Do you think she's involved?" Miss Marple's eyes were thoughtful. "She has no patience for deception, which is telling in itself, but her passion for beauty may blind her to other things. Now, Dolly, I must meet Mr. Voss. A collector's heart is a curious thing." Arranging to meet Voss required a walk to the village inn, where he was staying. Dolly offered to drive, but Miss Marple preferred the fresh air, and they set out along the lane. The inn, a quaint establishment with roses climbing its walls, was quiet save for the clink of glasses in the bar. Mr. Voss received them in a private parlor, his thin frame draped in a tailored suit, his mustache meticulously trimmed. Books and catalogues of antiques were strewn across a table, and his eyes, sharp and unblinking, fixed on Miss Marple with polite curiosity. "Miss Marple," he said, rising, "Mrs. Bantry tells me you're assisting with this unfortunate affair. I'm at your disposal." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her manner unassuming. "You're most kind, Mr. Voss. I understand you admired Colonel Bantry's mirror." Voss's face lit up, a rare warmth breaking through his reserve. "Admired? I was enchanted. A French Regency piece, likely from the 1810s, with gilding that sings of craftsmanship. I told Bantry he was a fool to keep it in a hallway. It belongs in a collection, cherished by those who understand its value. I offered to buy it, but he refused." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly. "You left the Manor after dinner, I believe?" "Yes, around 9:30, Voss said, his tone even. "I walked back here. A brisk evening, but I enjoy the solitude." "You walked alone?" Miss Marple asked, her voice mild. "Quite alone," he replied, his fingers brushing his mustache. "The village was quiet, and I was in bed by 10. Miss Marple thanked him, her eyes lingering on the walking stick propped against the wall. Its tip was slightly worn, as if used for more than casual strolls. As they left the inn, Dolly whispered, "He's so intense, Jane. Do you think he's the thief?" Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. "He loves beauty, Dolly, and love can make a man reckless. But we must look closer. There are threads here that do not yet connect." As they walked back to Ashfield Hall, Miss Marple's mind was alive with details. The butler's photograph, the widow's chatter, the decorator's sketches, the collector's fervor. Each was a piece of a puzzle, and she knew from the quiet dramas of St. Mary Mead that the truth often lay in what was not said. The mirror was gone, but its absence was a reflection of someone's heart, and Miss Marple intended to see it clearly. Chapter 3. The Scene of the Crime. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn of Ashfield Hall as Miss Jane Marple stepped into the grand hallway, her footsteps muffled by the thick runner that stretched its length. The air carried the faint scent of beeswax and old wood, a testament to the Manor's meticulous upkeep. Dolly Bantry trailed behind, her nervous energy barely contained as she gestured toward the bare wall where the antique mirror had once hung. "It's so strange, Jane," she said, her voice hushed as if the portraits might overhear. "It was right there, gleaming like a jewel, and now, nothing. It's as if it never existed." Miss Marple adjusted her spectacles and surveyed the scene with the quiet intensity of a gardener inspecting a rose bed for pests. The hallway was a noble space, its oak-paneled walls adorned with stern Bantry forebears, their painted eyes fixed in eternal judgment. The empty space on the wall was a wound in the room's symmetry, marked only by 4 small screw holes and a faint rectangle where dust had not settled. The mirror's absence seemed to amplify the hall's silence, as if it had taken some vital pulse with it. Inspector Craddock, a youngish man with an earnest demeanor and a notebook perpetually in hand, approached from the far end of the hall. His tie was slightly askew, a sign of the morning's frustrations. "Miss Marple," he said, with a nod that held both respect and a trace of exasperation. "Mrs. Bantry said you'd be coming. I'm afraid we've little to show for our efforts. No fingerprints, no forced entry, no witnesses. The mirror might as well have walked off on its own." Miss Marple's lips twitched in a faint smile. "Mirrors, Inspector, are not known for their wanderlust. Someone persuaded it to leave, and with considerable care, I suspect." She stepped closer to the wall, her eyes tracing the screw holes. They were clean, with no splintered wood or bent metal. "The screws were removed deliberately," she observed. "A screwdriver, perhaps, wielded by someone who knew the mirror's weight and value. It was no hasty theft." Craddock scribbled in his notebook. We thought the same. The mirror was heavy. Over 100 pounds, Colonel Bantry says. It would have taken strength to carry it, and more than one person, I'd wager, to do it quietly. Miss Marple tilted her head, her gaze falling to the polished floorboards. A faint scuff mark, barely visible, marred the wood near the baseboard, its curve suggesting something dragged or pivoted. "Not necessarily, Inspector," she said softly. "One person, if clever and prepared, might manage it. A handcart, perhaps, or a sling to ease the weight." She straightened, her eyes scanning the hall's length. "The chandelier was dimmed last night," Dolly said. "Was there any other light?" Craddock nodded toward a brass sconce on the opposite wall. "Just that, ma'am, and it's kept low after dinner. The servants use oil lamps for their rounds, but Grayson swears they were all accounted for." Miss Marple's fingers brushed the edge of her scarf as she considered this. "Grayson, the butler. He locked the house at 10, I believe." She turned to the man himself, who had appeared silently at the hall's entrance, his posture as rigid as the portraits above him. "Yes, ma'am," Grayson said, his voice a low, measured cadence. "I checked every door and window, as is my habit. The house was secure." Miss Marple's eyes, mild but piercing, met his. "And the mirror, Mr. Grayson, did you notice it when you made your rounds? Its surface must have caught the light, even dimmed." Grayson's expression did not waver, though his fingers tightened briefly on the tray he carried. "I didn't look at it directly, ma'am. My focus was on the locks, but I saw nothing amiss, no shadows, no movement." "Of course," Miss Marple said, her tone as gentle as a summer breeze. "You have a great many duties. Did you perhaps polish the mirror's frame that day? Such a fine piece would require care." Grayson shook his head, a flicker of unease in his eyes. "No, ma'am. The housemaid, Ellen, dusts it daily, but I had no cause to touch it." Miss Marple nodded, dismissing him with a smile that belied the sharpness of her thoughts. As Grayson retreated, she turned to Craddock. "A butler's rounds are a clockwork affair, Inspector, but even clocks can miss a tick. Tell me, have you examined the grounds outside this window?" She gestured to the tall sash window at the hall's end, its panes glinting in the afternoon light. Craddock sighed. "We did, but the gravel path outside holds no clear prints. The gardener says it was raked yesterday morning, and any marks from last night would be faint at best. We found a few scuffs, but nothing distinct." Miss Marple approached the window, her steps slow but purposeful. The latch was secure, its brass polished to a mirror-like sheen. Ironic, she thought, given the circumstances. She peered through the glass, noting the loose gravel beyond, and the faint outline of a flower bed beneath. A heavy mirror, carried through a window, would leave chaos, she mused. Yet there is none. Perhaps it did not leave this way at all. Dolly, who had been hovering anxiously, spoke up. "But Jane, how else could it have gone? The front door was locked, and the servant's entrance is too narrow for something so large." Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "A house like this, Dolly, has more ways out than one might think. Old manors are full of quirks. Back, stairs, service corridors, even forgotten doors. Have you a floor plan, perhaps?" Dolly brightened. "Arthur keeps one in the study, for the renovations. I'll fetch it." As Dolly hurried off, Miss Marple continued her inspection, her attention drawn to a narrow door half hidden behind a tapestry at the hall's far end. It was painted to blend with the paneling, its handle small and unobtrusive. She pushed it gently, revealing a dim corridor leading toward the servants' quarters. "Interesting," she murmured. "A quiet path for a quiet theft." Craddock followed her gaze. "That leads to the back stairs, ma'am. The servants use it, but it's locked at night. Grayson had the key." Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. "Keys, Inspector, are only as loyal as their keepers. But let us not jump to conclusions. The mirror's journey began here, and its path will tell us who guided it." Dolly returned with a yellowed floor plan, its edges curling from age. Miss Marple spread it on a nearby console table, her finger tracing the hallway's outline. "Here we are," she said, pointing to the main hall. "The front door, the window, and this service corridor. Are there other exits nearby?" Dolly peered at the plan. "There's a side door near the kitchen, but it's bolted from the inside, and the conservatory door, but it's a good distance from here, and the path outside is muddy. Someone would have tracked dirt in." Miss Marple's eyes lingered on the plan, noting a small alcove marked near the service corridor. "What is this space, Dolly?" "Oh, that's just a storage cupboard," Dolly said. "For linens and such. It's hardly used. The door sticks, and the maids complain it's damp." Miss Marple made a mental note to inspect it later. "A damp cupboard can hide more than linens," she said softly. She turned to Craddock. "Have your men searched the outbuildings? A mirror so large would need a hiding place, at least temporarily." "We've checked the stables and the gardener's shed," Craddock replied. "Nothing but tools and hay. We're searching the village now, in case it was spirited away in the night." Miss Marple nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. The hallway's silence, the scuff mark, the hidden door, all were pieces of a puzzle that refused to align. She recalled the villagers of St. Mary Mead, how their smallest habits, a glance, a pause, revealed their secrets. This theft was no different. Someone had moved with purpose, unseen but not untraceable. "Dolly," she said, folding the floor plan, "I should like to speak with the housemaid, Ellen, if she's about. She dusted the mirror daily, you said. She may have seen something the rest of us missed." Dolly sent for Ellen, who appeared moments later, a young woman with nervous hands and downcast eyes. Her apron was crisp, but her cheeks were flushed from the morning's upheaval. "Ma'am," she said, bobbing a curtsy to Miss Marple. "Mrs. Bantry said you wanted me?" "Yes, Ellen," Miss Marple said, her voice warm and encouraging. "You cared for the mirror, I understand. A beautiful piece, was it not?" Ellen's eyes brightened briefly. "Oh, yes, ma'am, like something from a palace. I dusted it every morning, careful not to smudge the glass. It was so clear, you could see every detail of the hall in it." "And yesterday?" Miss Marple asked. "Did anything strike you as unusual? A visitor lingering, perhaps, or a mark on the frame?" Ellen hesitated, twisting her apron. "Well, ma'am, I did notice Miss Lyle measuring near it in the afternoon. She had a tape measure, said it was for curtains, but she kept looking at the mirror. And Mr. Voss, he stood there a long time before dinner, just staring. I thought he was admiring it like." Miss Marple's smile was encouraging. "And after dinner, did you pass through the hall again?" Ellen nodded. "I did, ma'am, about 9, to fetch a tray from the dining room. The mirror was still there, shining under the chandelier. I didn't go back after that. Grayson sent me to bed once the dishes were done." "Thank you, Ellen," Miss Marple said, her mind turning over the girl's words. A decorator measuring, a collector staring, a butler locking doors. Each was a thread, and somewhere they knotted together. As Ellen departed, Craddock cleared his throat. Miss Marple, I don't mean to doubt you, but this feels like chasing shadows. The mirror's gone, and we've no solid evidence. What are you looking for?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. "Shadows, Inspector, are precisely what I seek. They fall where light does not, and in this house someone has been very careful to avoid the light. We shall find them yet." She turned to Dolly. "I shall return tomorrow, Dolly, after I've had time to think. In the meantime, keep your eyes open. People reveal themselves when they think no one is watching." As she stepped out into the fading daylight, Miss Marple's mind was alive with possibilities. The hallway had spoken, in its scuffs and silences, and she knew the mirror's absence was only the beginning of the story. Chapter 4. The Widow's Tale. The drawing room of Ashfield Hall was a haven of warmth against the chill of the October afternoon, its fire casting a golden glow over the damask upholstery and polished mahogany. Miss Jane Marple sat near the hearth, her knitting needles clicking with the steady rhythm of a metronome, while Dolly Bantry fussed with a silver tea tray. The air was fragrant with the scent of Darjeeling and freshly baked scones, but beneath the cozy domesticity lay a tension that seemed to hum through the room. The theft of the antique mirror had unsettled the household, and Miss Marple, with her quiet presence, was determined to unravel its threads. Dolly poured the tea, her hands betraying a slight tremble. "Jane, I can't stop thinking about that empty wall. It's like a ghost in the house. And Clara Wentworth, she's been chattering non-stop since breakfast, as if she's auditioning for a stage play. Shall I fetch her?" Miss Marple's eyes, bright and bird-like behind her spectacles, met Dolly's with a reassuring nod. "Yes, please, Dolly. Mrs. Wentworth's chatter may be more revealing than she intends. People often say too much when they're nervous." Dolly bustled out, and Miss Marple leaned back, her needles pausing as she considered the morning's observations. The hallway's scuff mark, the undisturbed screw holes, the hidden service corridor, all pointed to a thief who knew the house and its rhythms. But knowledge alone was not enough. Motive was the key, and Mrs. Clara Wentworth, with her penchant for gossip, might unwittingly hold a piece of the puzzle. The door swung open, and Mrs. Wentworth entered in a rustle of black silk, her mourning attire offset by a brooch that glinted with understated elegance. Her face, framed by a lace cap, was animated with a mixture of curiosity and self-importance. "Miss Marple," she exclaimed, settling onto the sofa with the grace of a practiced guest. "Dolly says you're quite the sleuth. What a dreadful business this is. That mirror was the jewel of the house, and to think someone crept in and stole it." Miss Marple's smile was warm but measured. "Indeed, Mrs. Wentworth. A bold act to take something so large and valuable. You were here last night, I understand. Perhaps you noticed something out of the ordinary?" Clara's eyes widened, and she leaned forward, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, I don't like to speak ill, but that decorator, Miss Lyle, was awfully suspicious. She was in the hallway all afternoon, measuring this and that, muttering about proportions. I saw her run her fingers along the mirror's frame, almost caressing it, if you ask me. And Mr. Voss, oh, he was positively enraptured at dinner, kept saying it was a crime to leave such a piece in a drafty corridor. I wouldn't put it past either of them." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, the soft click a counterpoint to Clara's animated tone. "You have a keen eye, Mrs. Wentworth. Did you speak with Mr. Voss about the mirror yourself?" "Oh, yes. Clara said, waving a gloved hand. Over the soup course, he went on about its history. French, from some comte's estate, he said. I told him it reminded me of a mirror my late husband once bid on at Sotheby's, though we lost it to a dreadful American. Mr. Voss seemed quite taken with my story, though I dare say he was more interested in the mirror than in me. She laughed, a tinkling sound that held a trace of pique. Miss Marple tilted her head, her expression one of polite interest. And Miss Lyle? Did she join your conversation? Clara's lips pursed. She did, though she was rather sharp about it. Said the mirror was wasted. Here, that it needed a grander setting. I thought it a bit impertinent, but she's one of those modern girls, all ideas and no manners. She and Mr. Voss got into a bit of a debate about whether it belonged in a museum or a private collection. I stayed out of it. I prefer harmony at the dinner table. Of course, Miss Marple murmured. And after dinner, you retired to your room, I believe? Clara nodded, smoothing her skirt. Yes, by 9. I was writing letters to my cousin in Bath and an old friend in London. The house was so quiet, I could hear the clock in the hall ticking. I suppose I fell asleep around 11. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. Quiet, you say? No footsteps, no creaks? Old houses are rarely silent. Clara hesitated, her fingers twisting the edge of her handkerchief. Well, now you mention it, there was a sound, faint, like the wind rattling a window. I thought nothing of it at the time. This house is full of noises, isn't it? All those beams settling. She laughed again, but it was less convincing. Miss Marple's smile remained gentle. The wind can be a convenient explanation, Mrs. Wentworth. Did you perhaps glance into the hallway before retiring? A guest might check the house is secure. Clara's cheeks flushed faintly. Well, yes, I did step out briefly, around 9:30 to fetch a shawl from the parlor. The mirror was still there, gleaming under the chandelier. I didn't linger. Grayson was about, tidying up, and I didn't want to be in his way. Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze steady. Grayson was in the hallway then? Alone? Yes, Clara said, then caught herself. Well, I assume alone. I only saw him for a moment carrying a tray to the kitchen. He's so silent, that man, like a ghost himself. Miss Marple nodded, her mind turning over this new detail. Thank you, Mrs. Wentworth. You've been most helpful. A house like this holds many reflections, and your observations are a mirror of their own. Clara beamed, clearly pleased to be considered useful, and rose to leave. If I think of anything else, Miss Marple, I'll tell you at once. Such a thrill to help solve a mystery. She swept out, her silk skirts whispering against the floor. Dolly, who had been listening from the corner, sank onto the sofa with a sigh. Jane, she's exhausting. All that talk, and I'm not sure she said anything useful at all. Do you think she's hiding something? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. People like Mrs. Wentworth rarely hide things deliberately, Dolly. They scatter truths like breadcrumbs, unaware of their value. She saw Grayson in the hallway, and she heard a sound she dismissed as the wind. Both may mean more than she thinks. Dolly frowned, pouring herself another cup of tea. You don't suspect Clara, do you? She's flighty, but a thief? She'd faint at the thought of carrying something so heavy. Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. Theft, Dolly, is not always about strength. It's about opportunity and desire. Mrs. Wentworth desires attention, not mirrors, but her eyes and ears may have caught something vital. I should like to see that hallway again, perhaps at the same hour she did. They returned to the hallway, now dimmer as the afternoon light faded. The chandelier cast a soft glow, its crystals winking like distant stars. Miss Marple stood before the empty wall, her gaze sweeping from the screw holes to the scuff mark she had noted earlier. She stepped to the window, its latch still secure, and peered out at the gravel path. The loose stones showed no clear marks, but a faint depression near the flower bed caught her eye, a shallow curve, as if something heavy had rested there briefly. "Dolly," she said, turning, "you mentioned the servants' entrance is narrow. Is there another way out nearby, perhaps less obvious?" Dolly thought for a moment. "There's the old coal chute near the kitchen, but it's been boarded up for years. Arthur says it's a nuisance, damp and drafty. The servants avoid it." Miss Marple's eyes brightened. "A boarded chute is still a chute, Dolly. May we see it?" They made their way through the service corridor, its walls lined with faded wallpaper and the air cooler than the main house. The coal chute was a low iron door set into the wall near the kitchen, its edges rusted and its bolts loose. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers brushing the floor nearby. A faint smudge of dirt, almost invisible, marked the stone. "Interesting," she murmured. "Not coal dust, but earth. Someone has been here recently." Dolly shivered. "Jane, you don't think the mirror went out this way? It's far too small." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, rising. "But small paths can lead to large secrets. We mustn't assume too much yet." As they returned to the drawing room, Miss Marple's thoughts were a tapestry of impressions: Clara's chatter, Grayson's presence in the hallway, the smudge by the chute. Each was a fragment, and she knew from the quiet dramas of St. Mary Mead that fragments, when pieced together, could reveal a startling whole. "Dolly," she said, settling back into her chair, "I think it's time I spoke with Miss Lyle. Her eye for detail may see what others miss, even if she doesn't know it." Dolly nodded, her face a mixture of hope and apprehension. "I'll send for her. Oh, Jane, I do hope you're getting somewhere. Arthur's threatening to call Scotland Yard." Miss Marple's smile was serene. "Let him threaten, Dolly. The truth is closer than he thinks, and it's often the simplest things that shine the brightest." Chapter 5. The Decorator's Defense. The library of Ashfield Hall was a sanctuary of books and shadows, its high shelves heavy with leather-bound volumes, and the air thick with the scent of old paper and wax polish. Miss Jane Marple stood just inside the threshold, her small figure dwarfed by the towering bookcases, yet her presence seemed to command the room's attention. A single lamp burned on a mahogany table, casting a warm pool of light over Miss Felicity Lyle, who sat hunched over a sketchbook, her pencil moving with sharp, decisive strokes. The decorator's auburn hair was pinned in a careless bun, strands escaping to frame a face set in concentration, though her eyes flicked up as Miss Marple entered, sharp and wary as a fox. Dolly Bantry hovered behind, her hands clasped anxiously. "Felicity, this is Miss Marple," she said, her voice tinged with the deference one reserves for a guest of uncertain authority. "She's helping with the matter of the mirror." Felicity set her pencil down with a deliberate snap, leaning back in her chair. "I heard you were poking about," she said, her tone blunt but not unkind. "I suppose you think I had something to do with it. Well, I didn't. I'm here to hang curtains, not steal antiques." Miss Marple's smile was as gentle as a spring breeze, disarming in its simplicity. "No one accuses you, Miss Lyle. she said, settling into a chair across from the decorator, her knitting bag resting on her lap. "But you have an artist's eye, and eyes like yours, Miss Little. I'd value your thoughts on the mirror." And the night it vanished. Felicity's gaze softened slightly, though her posture remained guarded. "The mirror was a gem," she said, her voice warming with the enthusiasm of one who lived for beauty. "Regency French, with gilding that hadn't tarnished a bit. It was hung all wrong, mind you, too low, and the chandelier's light made it glare like a cheap bauble. I told Colonel Bantry it deserved a better spot, maybe the drawing room where it could breathe. But he's stubborn as oak." Miss Marple's needles emerged from her bag, clicking softly as she began a new row. "You admired it then," she said, her tone conversational. "Did you examine it closely, perhaps while measuring for your curtains?" Felicity's eyes narrowed, sensing a trap, but she answered readily. "I did measure near it, yes. The hallway's proportions are a nightmare, too narrow for the mirror's scale. I ran my tape along the wall to check for new drapes. Mrs. Wentworth saw me, probably thought I was plotting something sinister." She snorted, a flash of amusement breaking her reserve. "I touched the frame once to see the carving up close. Exquisite work. But steal it? I'd sooner paint the Mona Lisa blue." Miss Marple's lips twitched, appreciating the young woman's candor. "You were in the library after dinner, I believe, working on your sketches?" Felicity nodded, gesturing to the open book before her, its pages filled with intricate drawings of chandeliers and cornices. "Until 10, at least. I was designing a new light fixture for this room. Colonel Bantry wants something grander, though he'll balk at the cost. I heard nothing unusual, just the usual creaks of this old pile. Went to bed after that, straight to my room." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the sketchbook, noting the precision of the lines, the confident sweep of Felicity's hand. "You must have a steady grip, Miss Lyle, to draw so finely. The mirror was heavy, was it not? Removing it would require skill as much as strength." Felicity's mouth quirked, as if recognizing the probe for what it was. "Heavy as sin, I'd wager. I saw the footman struggle to hang it. Whoever took it needed more than muscle. They'd need a plan. I'm not saying I couldn't have done it, mind you. I've hauled furniture before. But why would I? I'm here to make this place beautiful, not rob it blind." Miss Marple nodded, her needles never faltering. "A fair point. You spoke with Mr. Voss at dinner, I understand. About the mirror?" Felicity leaned forward, her elbows on the table. "Oh, yes. Voss was obsessed. Kept calling it a masterpiece and going on about its provenance. Some French comte's estate, he said. I agreed it was stunning, but told him it deserved a gallery, not a dusty manor. He got this look, like I'd suggested burning it. Said a private collector would cherish it more than any museum. We argued a bit, politely, mind you, but I could see he was smitten." Miss Marple's gaze sharpened, though her voice remained mild. "Smitten, you say? Did he seem possessive?" Felicity considered this, her fingers tapping the sketchbook. "Possessive's the word. He kept glancing at the hallway during dinner, like he couldn't bear to be away from it. I thought he was just eccentric. Collectors are like that, aren't they? Hoarding beauty like dragons with gold. But now?" She trailed off, her brow furrowing. "You think he took it?" "I think nothing yet," Miss Marple said, her smile serene. "But a man's passion can lead him down curious paths. You left the dining room when, Miss Lyle?" 9, maybe a bit before, Felicity replied. Voss was still there, finishing his wine. Mrs. Wentworth had already flounced off to write her letters. Grayson was clearing plates, silent as a shadow. I came here to work, and that's all I know. Miss Marple's eyes drifted to Felicity's hands, calloused from handling tools and fabric, yet nimble enough for delicate sketches. "You've a talent for detail," she said. "Did you notice anything in the hallway that evening? A shadow out of place, perhaps, or a sound?" Felicity shook her head. "Nothing worth mentioning. The chandelier was dim, and the hall was quiet. I passed the mirror on my way here. It was still there, catching the light. I didn't look long. My mind was on my work." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts weaving a pattern from Felicity's words. The decorator's bluntness was refreshing, but her focus on her craft might have blinded her to subtler details. "Thank you, Miss Lyle," she said, tucking her knitting away. "You've been most helpful. An artist's perspective is a rare gift." Felicity shrugged, picking up her pencil. "If you say so. I just hope you find that mirror before Colonel Bantry decides my curtains are to blame." Her tone was dry, but a spark of humor lit her eyes as she returned to her sketch. Dolly, who had been listening quietly, escorted Miss Marple back to the drawing room. "Well, Jane," she whispered, her eyes wide. "She's so prickly, but I can't see her as a thief. All that talk about galleries and collectors. What do you make of it?" Miss Marple settled into a chair, her hands folded neatly. "Miss Lyle sees beauty clearly, Dolly, but people less so. Her candor is her strength, but it may hide what she overlooked. She confirms Mr. Voss's obsession, which is a thread worth following. And Grayson, always present, always silent. His shadow lingers in every account." Dolly frowned, pouring fresh tea. "You're not saying Grayson took it, are you? He's so proper." "Propriety," Miss Marple said softly, "is a mask like any other, but let us not rush to judgment. Miss Lyle mentioned the chandelier's light, dim, but enough to make the mirror gleam. I wonder if that light caught something else that night." Dolly's face lit up. "Shall we check the hallway again? The police have been over it, but you always see things they miss." Miss Marple shook her head, her smile thoughtful. "Not yet, Dolly. The hallway has told us what it can for now. I'd like to see the coal chute again, perhaps in the evening light. Shadows fall differently then, and they may reveal what daylight hides." They made their way to the service corridor, the air cooler and tinged with the damp earthiness of neglected spaces. The coal chute's iron door was as Miss Marple had left it, its bolts loose and the smudge of dirt still visible on the stone floor. She knelt, her fingers tracing the smudge's edge. It was faint, but its texture suggested something dragged, a cloth, perhaps, or the edge of a crate. "This was no careless mark," she murmured. "Someone passed through here, and not for coal." Dolly shivered, wrapping her shawl tighter. "Jane, it's so grim down here. Do you really think the mirror went this way? It's such a tight space." Miss Marple rose, her eyes scanning the corridor's dim length. "Tight, but not impossible. A determined mind finds ways where others see walls. We must learn more about Mr. Voss's movements after dinner, and Grayson's, for that matter. Their paths crossed in that hallway, and one of them may have lingered longer than they claim." As they returned to the drawing room, the clock struck 4, its chimes echoing through the house. Miss Marple's mind was a whirl of impressions. Felicity's sketches, Clara's wind-like sound, the smudge by the chute. Each was a fragment, and she knew from the quiet intrigues of St. Mary Mead that fragments, when aligned, could reflect a truth as clear as any mirror. "Dolly," she said, her voice firm, "I must speak with Mr. Voss tomorrow. His passion for the mirror may be the key, or it may be a veil. Either way, I intend to see through it." Dolly nodded, her faith in her friend unshaken. "I'll arrange it, Jane. Oh, I do hope you're close to solving this. Arthur's talking about hiring a private detective, and I'd much rather it was you." Miss Marple's smile was serene. "Detectives, Dolly, look for clues. I look for people, and people, in the end, always betray themselves." Chapter 6. The Collector's Passion. The village of St. Mary Mead wore its autumn hues with quiet dignity, the leaves of its elms and oaks painting the lanes in shades of amber and russet. Miss Jane Marple walked briskly toward the village inn, her black handbag tucked under her arm and her scarf fluttering in the crisp breeze. The inn, a quaint establishment with ivy-clad walls and a sign proclaiming "The Blue Boar," stood at the heart of the village, its windows glowing with the promise of warmth. Miss Marple had arranged to meet Mr. Reginald Voss there, and as she approached, her mind was alive with the threads of the mystery, the scuff mark in the hallway, the smudge by the coal chute, and the fleeting glimpses of intent in the accounts of those at Ashfield Hall. Dolly Bantry had offered to accompany her, but Miss Marple preferred to face the collector alone, knowing that a one-on-one conversation often revealed what a crowd concealed. She stepped into the inn's parlor, a cozy room with low beams and a fire crackling in the grate. Mr. Voss was already there, seated at a small table cluttered with auction catalogs and a notebook filled with meticulous handwriting. He was a wiry man, his tailored suit accentuating his lean frame, and his mustache, impeccably trimmed, seemed to bristle with a life of its own. His eyes, sharp and unblinking, met hers as she entered, and he rose with a polite bow. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth but tinged with a collector's fervor. "Mrs. Bantry mentioned you wished to discuss the unfortunate affair at Ashfield Hall. I'm happy to assist, though I fear I know little of use." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting bag resting on her lap like a trusted companion. "You're most kind, Mr. Voss," she said, her tone as gentle as the firelight. "I understand you're a man of refined taste, particularly for antiques. The mirror at Ashfield Hall must have been a rare delight." Voss's face lit up, his reserve melting into enthusiasm. "A delight? It was a revelation, Miss Marple. French, early 19th century, likely crafted for a noble house. The gilding was pristine, the acanthus leaves carved with a precision you rarely see today. I told Colonel Bantry it was a crime to hang such a piece in a hallway, exposed to dust and careless hands. It belonged in a collection, cherished by someone who understood its worth." Miss Marple's needles emerged, clicking softly as she began a new row. "You offered to buy it, I believe?" Voss nodded, a faint flush coloring his cheeks. "I did, at dinner. A generous sum, though Bantry laughed it off. He said it was a family piece now, meant to stay. I confess I was disappointed. Such beauty deserves more than a provincial manor." Miss Marple's eyes, mild but piercing, noted the intensity in his voice. "Disappointment can linger, Mr. Voss. You left the manor after dinner, around 9:30? "Yes," he said, his fingers brushing his mustache. "I walked back here, a brisk stroll under the stars. The village was quiet, and I was in my room by 10, reading." He gestured to the catalogs on the table. "I'm preparing for an auction in London next week." "Alone?" Miss Marple asked, her tone conversational but deliberate. "A collector's mind must be restless. surrounded by such treasures. Voss's smile was tight. Quite alone, Miss Marple. I enjoy solitude. It sharpens the mind. I saw no one and heard nothing unusual. The theft shocked me when I learned of it this morning. Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze drifting to the walking stick propped against the wall. Its tip was worn, not from casual use, but from repeated pressure, as if it had borne weight or scraped against something rough. "You walk often, Mr. Voss?" she asked, her voice light. "Every day," he replied. "It clears the head. The lanes here are charming, though the mud can be a nuisance." "Indeed," Miss Marple said, her smile serene. "Mud has a way of clinging, doesn't it? Like secrets." She leaned forward slightly. "You spoke with Miss Lyle about the mirror, I understand. She thought it suited a gallery." Voss's eyes flickered, a spark of irritation surfacing. "She did. A gallery would display it, but a collector would cherish it. Miss Lyle's talented, but she lacks reverence. She sees art as decoration, not devotion. We disagreed on that point." Miss Marple nodded, her mind cataloguing his words. "And Mrs. Wentworth, she mentioned your admiration for the mirror." Voss's lips twitched, a hint of disdain breaking through. "Mrs. Wentworth is a talker, Miss Marple. She prattled about auctions and her late husband's ventures, but she knows little of true value. She was more interested in gossip than the mirror's craftsmanship." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. "And Grayson, the butler, a man in his position sees much, yet says little." Voss shrugged, his demeanor cooling. "He served dinner efficiently and vanished as butlers do. I barely noticed him, except when he refilled my glass. If he saw anything, he kept it to himself." Miss Marple thanked him, her eyes lingering on the catalogues, their pages marked with notes on mirrors and other antiques. As she rose, she glanced at the floor near his chair, where a faint trace of dried mud clung to the carpet, its reddish hue distinct from the inn's polished boards. "You've been most helpful, Mr. Voss," she said. "A collector's passion is a rare thing, but it can cast long shadows." Voss bowed, his expression polite but guarded. "I hope you find the thief, Miss Marple. Such a loss is a wound to beauty itself." As Miss Marple stepped out into the village lane, the air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves. She paused, her gaze settling on the path leading to the inn's stables, where a narrow track of mud showed signs of recent disturbance. Not footprints, but something heavier, like the edge of a wheel. Her mind turned over Voss's words, his fervor for the mirror, the worn tip of his stick, the mud that did not belong. Passion, she knew, could drive a man to folly, and folly left traces, however faint. She returned to Ashfield Hall, where Dolly awaited her in the drawing room, her face alight with curiosity. "Well, Jane, is Voss our man? He's so intense I wouldn't put it past him." Miss Marple settled into a chair, her knitting resuming its steady rhythm. "He is intense, Dolly, and intensity is a fire that burns hot but leaves ash. Mr. Voss loves the mirror, perhaps too much. His walk last night, his solitude. These are threads that may lead somewhere or nowhere. We must see where they cross with others." Dolly frowned, pouring tea. "You're so cryptic, Jane. What about that mud you mentioned? Did you see anything at the inn?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "A trace, Dolly, like a whisper in a quiet room. The inn stables have a story to tell, I think. Tomorrow I'd like to speak with Grayson again. His silence is as telling as Voss's passion, and I suspect he saw more than he admits." Dolly sighed, her hands fluttering. "Oh, Jane, I wish you'd just tell me who did it. Arthur's pacing like a caged bear, and the police are no closer to answers." Miss Marple's smile was serene. "Patience, Dolly. A mystery is like a skein of wool, tangled at first, but with careful hands it unravels. We are close to a knot, I think, and it may lead us to the mirror." As the fire crackled and the evening deepened, Miss Marple's thoughts wove a pattern of glances, words, and traces. Voss's obsession, Grayson's reserve, Felicity's candor, Clara's chatter. Each was a piece of the puzzle, and she knew from the quiet intrigues of St. Mary Mead that the smallest detail could reflect the truth in startling clarity. Chapter 7. The Butler's Routine. The late afternoon light filtered through the high windows of Ashfield Hall, casting a soft glow over the servants' quarters, where the air held a faint chill despite the warmth of the season. Miss Jane Marple stood in the narrow corridor, her black handbag clutched in one hand, her eyes scanning the unadorned walls with the same quiet scrutiny she might give a neighbor's garden in St. Mary Mead. The theft of the antique mirror had left the household in a state of uneasy suspense, and Miss Marple, with her unassuming presence, was determined to trace the threads of truth through the house's routines and silences. Dolly Bantry, ever her faithful companion, hovered nearby, her face a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. "Jane, I don't know how you stay so calm," she whispered, glancing toward the door of the butler's room. "Grayson's so proper, it's hard to imagine him involved in anything untoward. But you said his silence was telling. What do you mean?" Miss Marple's lips curved into a gentle smile. "A butler, Dolly, is like the ticking of a clock, always present, rarely noticed. But when the clock skips a beat, one must ask why. I'd like to see Mr. Grayson's quarters, if he permits. A man's space often speaks louder than his words." Dolly nodded, though her expression betrayed a flicker of doubt. She knocked softly on the door, and Grayson appeared almost instantly, his tall frame filling the doorway. His black suit was immaculate, his dark hair slicked back with precision, but his eyes held a guarded stillness that Miss Marple noted at once. "Mrs. Bantry, Miss Marple," he said, his voice as smooth as polished silver. "How may I assist you?" Miss Marple's tone was mild, almost apologetic. "Mr. Grayson, I hope we're not intruding. I understand you've a heavy burden keeping Ashfield Hall in order. Might we see your room? It's only a formality, but I find a glimpse of one's surroundings so illuminating." Grayson hesitated, a fleeting shadow crossing his face, but he stepped aside with a curt nod. "Of course, ma'am. There's little to see, but you're welcome." The room was small and Spartan, its furnishings limited to a narrow bed, a wooden chair, and a plain dresser topped with a single photograph in a simple frame. The image showed a young woman, her smile soft but tinged with melancholy. Miss Marple paused before it, her eyes softening. "Your fiancé, Mr. Grayson?" Mrs. Bantry mentioned her loss. Grayson's jaw tightened, though his voice remained steady. "Yes, ma'am. Mary, my late fiancée. She passed 3 years ago. I keep her photograph to remember." Miss Marple nodded, her gaze lingering on the frame's polished edge. "A touching tribute. Memory is a powerful thing, is it not?" She turned, her eyes sweeping the room. The floor was spotless, the bed made with military precision, but a faint scuff on the baseboard near the dresser caught her attention, a mark not unlike the one in the hallway, though smaller. "You keep a tidy space, Mr. Grayson, a man of habit, I imagine." Grayson inclined his head. "Habit is the backbone of service, ma'am. I rise at 6, tend to the household, and retire by 10 after locking the doors. Miss Marple's needles, which she had retrieved from her bag, began their familiar click. And the night of the theft, your routine was unchanged? Unchanged, Grayson said, his tone firm. I served dinner, cleared the table, and checked the locks at 10. The mirror was in place when I passed through the hallway at 9, fetching a tray for Mrs. Wentworth. I saw nothing unusual, no sounds, no shadows. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. A tray for Mrs. Wentworth? She mentioned seeing you in the hallway, carrying one. Was it a heavy load? Grayson's fingers twitched, almost imperceptibly. Just a tea service, ma'am. Light enough. I took it to the kitchen and returned to my duties. Miss Marple nodded, her smile serene. Of course, and the mirror's frame. Did you ever clean it yourself? Its gilding must have required care. That was Ellen's task, Grayson said, his voice unwavering. I oversaw the household, not the dusting. I had no cause to touch it. Miss Marple thanked him, her gaze lingering on the scuff mark as they left the room. Dolly, who had been silent throughout, whispered as they reached the corridor. Jane, did you see anything? His room's so bare, it's almost unnerving. Bareness can be revealing, Dolly, Miss Marple said softly. A man with so little to show may have much to hide. That scuff mark, for instance, it's fresh, like the one in the hallway, and his fiancée's photograph. It's polished daily, I'd wager, yet the dresser has no dust. He's a man who controls his world, but control can slip. They moved to the kitchen, where the housemaid Ellen was polishing silver, her hands quick but nervous. Miss Marple greeted her warmly, easing the girl's tension. Ellen, you've been so helpful already. I wonder if you could tell me about Mr. Grayson's movements that night. You saw him in the hallway, I believe? Ellen nodded, her cheeks flushing. Yes, ma'am, around 9, when I was fetching a tray from the dining room. He was carrying one too, heading to the kitchen. Later, closer to 10, I saw him near the hallway again, with a cloth in his hand. I thought he was polishing something. Silver, maybe. He told me to go to bed, said he'd finish the rounds. Miss Marple's eyes narrowed slightly. A cloth, you say? Not a tea service? Ellen frowned, thinking. No, ma'am, just a cloth. A white one, like we use for dusting. I didn't think much of it. He's always tidying up. Miss Marple's smile was encouraging. You've a good memory, Ellen. Did you see anyone else near the mirror that evening? No, ma'am, Ellen said. Just Miss Lyle earlier, measuring, and Mr. Voss staring at it before dinner. After that, it was just Grayson and the usual quiet. Miss Marple thanked her and led Dolly back to the drawing room, where the fire had dwindled to embers. Dolly sank onto the sofa, her hands clasped. Jane, what does it mean? Grayson with a cloth, not a tray? Is he lying? Not lying, perhaps, Miss Marple said, her needles clicking once more. But selective. A cloth could polish silver, or a mirror's frame, and his presence in the hallway at 10, when he claims all was quiet, suggests he saw more than he admits. Yet his room, his routine? They speak of a man who guards his secrets closely. Dolly's eyes widened. You think he took the mirror? But why? He's no collector. Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. Motive, Dolly, is like a shadow. It shifts with the light. Grayson's past, his fiancée's loss, may hold a key we haven't yet turned. But we must also consider Mr. Voss's passion and Miss Lyle's eye for detail. Their paths crossed in that hallway, and one of them left a trail. Dolly sighed, pouring tea from a cooling pot. You make it sound so simple, Jane, but it's all so tangled. What's next? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Next, Dolly, we look at the house itself, the coal chute, the service corridor. Those quiet paths may whisper what the people will not. Tomorrow, I'd like to see the grounds, particularly near the stables. A mirror cannot walk, but it can be carried, and I suspect its journey left a mark. As the evening deepened, Miss Marple's thoughts wove a tapestry of clues: Grayson's cloth, the scuff marks, Voss's fervor. Each was a thread, and she knew from the quiet dramas of St. Mary Mead that even the smallest stitch could unravel a mystery. The butler's routine was a clockwork facade, but clocks, she knew, could be set to mislead. Chapter 8. A pattern emerges. The drawing-room of Ashfield Hall was hushed in the gloaming, its heavy curtains drawn against the October chill, the fire casting flickering shadows across the walls. Miss Jane Marple sat in a high-backed chair, her knitting needles moving with their familiar soothing rhythm, while Dolly Bantry perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped in nervous anticipation. The theft of the antique mirror had woven a web of suspicion through the household, and Miss Marple, with her quiet patience, was untangling it thread by thread. The afternoon's conversations, Grayson's guarded silences, Voss's fervent passion, Felicity's blunt candor, and Clara's gossipy chatter had left her with a mosaic of impressions, each piece sharp but not yet aligned. Dolly broke the silence, her voice low. Jane, you've spoken to them all now, and I'm no closer to understanding who took that wretched mirror. Grayson's too proper, Voss is too intense, Felicity's too sharp, and Clara, well, she's just Clara. What do you make of it? Miss Marple's needles paused, her eyes gleaming behind her spectacles. A puzzle, Dolly, is like a village tapestry. Each thread seems ordinary alone, but together they form a picture. We have threads now, and they are beginning to weave a pattern. She set her knitting aside, folding her hands neatly. Let us consider what we know. The mirror was heavy, requiring strength and care to remove without noise. The screw holes were untouched, the hallway undisturbed save for a scuff mark. The coal chute bore a smudge of earth, and the inn stables showed a trace of a wheel. These are not accidents, Dolly. They are the footprints of intent. Dolly leaned forward, her eyes wide. You think it was planned, then? Not some spur-of-the-moment theft? Precisely, Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. Spontaneity leaves chaos, broken glass, torn wood. This was meticulous. Someone knew the mirror's weight, the house's rhythms, and the quietest path out. Let us review our players. Grayson, the butler, was in the hallway at 9 with a tray, and again near 10 with a cloth, according to Ellen. His room is orderly, but that scuff mark on his baseboard mirrors the one in the hall. He is strong, discreet, and knows every corner of Ashfield Hall. Dolly frowned, stirring her tea absently. But Grayson's so loyal. Why would he steal? He's no use for antiques. Miss Marple's smile was enigmatic. Loyalty, Dolly, can be a mask for other motives. His fiancée's loss may weigh on him, or there may be debts we know nothing of. But let us not fix on him yet. Miss Lyle, our decorator, has the skill to handle heavy objects and an eye for the mirror's value. She was in the library until 10, she says, and saw the mirror gleaming at 9. Her candor is refreshing, but her focus on her work may have blinded her to what passed nearby. She's so prickly, Dolly muttered, but I can't see her sneaking about with a mirror. She'd probably tell Arthur it was for his own good. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. Perhaps. Then there's Mrs. Wentworth, who heard a wind-like sound and saw Grayson in the hallway. Her chatter is a fog, but fog can hide pearls. She is observant, yet easily distracted by her own importance. I doubt she carried the mirror herself. She lacks the strength, but she may have seen more than she recalls. Dolly nodded, her face thoughtful. And Voss? He's the one who makes my skin crawl, Jane. All that talk about cherishing the mirror and the way he looked at it, like it was his already. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm. Mr. Voss is our most vivid thread, Dolly. His passion for the mirror borders on obsession. He offered to buy it, was rebuffed, and left the Manor at 9:30, walking alone to the inn. Yet the mud on his carpet and the worn tip of his walking stick suggest he moved with purpose that night. The wheel mark near the inn stables is no coincidence, I think. A collector's heart can be a greedy one, and greed leaves traces. Dolly's hands fluttered. You think Voss took it then? But how? He was gone before the theft. Miss Marple's gaze was steady. Was he, Dolly? Or did he ensure we believed he was gone? A man who walks alone can return, unseen, especially in a village as quiet as St. Mary Mead. The mirror's weight suggests a tool, a handcart, perhaps, small enough to maneuver through a service corridor or coal chute. Voss's fervor makes him a likely candidate, but we must not overlook Grayson's silence or Felicity's skill. Dolly sighed, sinking back into the sofa. It's all so tangled, Jane. The police are stumped, Arthur's furious, and I'm starting to think the mirror really did vanish into thin air. Miss Marple's smile was serene. Nothing vanishes, Dolly, except in stories. The mirror is somewhere, hidden by someone who planned its departure. Tomorrow, I'd like to see the stables here at Ashfield Hall and perhaps revisit the coal chute. The house has whispered its secrets, but the grounds may speak louder. Dolly brightened, eager for action. I'll have the gardener show you round first thing. Oh, Jane, I do hope you're close to an answer. Arthur's talking about offering a reward. Miss Marple's eyes softened. Rewards tempt honesty, Dolly, but they also stir greed. Let us keep our own counsel for now. The pattern is emerging, and I suspect it will soon show us the hand that wove it. As Dolly rose to fetch more tea, Miss Marple's thoughts turned inward, her mind a loom threading together the clues, the scuff marks, the smudge of earth, Voss's passion, Grayson's cloth. Each was a stitch in a design she could almost see, and she knew from the quiet intrigues of her village that the truth often lay in the smallest knot, waiting to be gently pulled free. The fire crackled, and the drawing-room settled into a companionable silence, but Miss Marple's needles clicked on, weaving a solution as surely as they wove her scarf. Chapter 9. The Hidden Trail. The morning mist hung low over St. Mary Mead, draping the village in a gauzy veil that softened the edges of its cottages and the looming silhouette of Ashfield Hall. Miss Jane Marple stepped out of her cottage, her sensible shoes crunching on the gravel path as she made her way toward the manor. Her black handbag was tucked under her arm, and her scarf was knotted neatly against the autumn chill. The theft of the antique mirror had stirred the household into a quiet frenzy, and Miss Marple, with her unerring knack for seeing through the ordinary, was determined to follow the faint trails left by the thief. Dolly Bantry met her at the manor's gate, her face a mixture of hope and exasperation. "Jane, you're early. I barely slept. thinking about that wretched mirror. Arthur's convinced it's halfway to London by now, but you don't think so, do you? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled behind her spectacles. A mirror of that size, Dolly, does not travel far without leaving a trace. Thieves are clever, but they are not invisible. I'd like to see the grounds today, particularly the stables and the paths near the coal chute. The house has told us much, but the earth may speak more plainly. Dolly nodded, leading the way across the lawn, where dew still clung to the grass. The stables stood at the edge of the estate, a sturdy brick structure with a pitched roof and a faint scent of hay and leather. The gardener, a grizzled man named Tompkins, was waiting, his cap pulled low over his eyes. "Mrs. Bantry said you wanted a look, ma'am," he said, his voice rough but respectful. "Ain't much to see, but the police already poked about. Found nothing but hoofprints and wheel ruts." Miss Marple's smile was gentle. "Hoofprints and ruts can be eloquent. Mr. Tompkins, may we walk the path to the village?" Tompkins led them along a narrow track that skirted the stables and wound toward the village lane, its surface a mix of packed earth and scattered gravel. Miss Marple's eyes scanned the ground, noting the churned mud where horses had trod and the deeper grooves of cartwheels. Near a low hedge, she paused, her gaze fixed on a faint mark, a narrow, shallow groove, distinct from the broader ruts. It was partially obscured by leaves, but its curve suggested something lighter than a farm cart, perhaps a hand cart used for smaller loads. "Dolly," Miss Marple said, pointing to the mark, "this is not the work of a heavy wagon. A hand cart, perhaps, maneuvered with care. Did any such cart come through here recently?" Dolly frowned, turning to Tompkins. "Have you seen anything like that, Tompkins? A cart, maybe late at night?" The gardener scratched his chin. "Can't say I have, ma'am. The lads use barrows for manure, but they're kept in the shed. No one's been in or out after dark, far as I know, 'cept maybe Mr. Voss walking back to the inn." Miss Marple's eyes sharpened. "Mr. Voss, you say? You saw him that night?" Tompkins shifted uncomfortably. "Not saw, ma'am, but heard. I live in the cottage yonder." He pointed to a small dwelling near the stables. "Heard footsteps on the lane. Round 10, maybe later. Thought it was him, heading to the inn. Didn't look out, too cold." Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing away this fragment. "Thank you, Mr. Tompkins. You've been most helpful. Might we see the shed where the barrows are kept?" The shed was a cluttered space, filled with gardening tools, sacks of feed, and 2 weathered hand carts propped against the wall. Miss Marple examined them, noting their worn wheels and sturdy frames. One cart had a faint smear of reddish mud on its edge, similar to the hue she had seen at the inn. "This mud," she said softly, "is not from the stables. It's the same as the village lanes. Someone used this cart recently, and not for manure." Dolly's eyes widened. "Jane, you think the mirror was moved on that? But how? It's so heavy." "A handcart, Dolly, can carry great weight if guided with care," Miss Marple said. "And a determined mind finds ways to move silently. Let us return to the coal chute. Its smudge of earth may connect to this trail." They retraced their steps to the manor, entering through the service corridor to the low iron door of the coal chute. The smudge of dirt on the stone floor was still there, its texture matching the mud on the cart. Miss Marple knelt, her fingers brushing the mark. "This was no accident," she murmured. "Someone passed through here, carrying something heavy enough to leave a trace, but light enough to manage alone." Dolly shivered, her shawl pulled tight. "Jane, it's so grim down here. Do you really think the mirror went out this way? It's such a tight fit." Miss Marple rose, her gaze thoughtful. "Tight, but possible. The mirror's frame was narrow, and a handcart could ease its passage. The thief knew the house's secrets, its quiet corners, its forgotten doors. We must learn more about Mr. Voss's movements after he left, and Grayson's role in the night's routine." Dolly's face brightened. "Shall I call Inspector Craddock? He could search Voss's room at the inn." Miss Marple's smile was cautious. "A search, yes, but discreetly. We mustn't startle our quarry. Inspector Craddock is thorough, but he misses the human touch. I'd like him to look at Voss's belongings, particularly anything tied to his collecting, papers, receipts, perhaps a map." They returned to the drawing room, where Dolly telephoned the police station. Craddock arrived within the hour, his notebook at the ready and his expression a mix of curiosity and skepticism. "Miss Marple," he said. "Mrs. Bantry says you've found something. A cart, was it?" "A trail, Inspector," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. "A handcart's mark near the stables, mud matching the village lane, and a smudge by the coal chute. I suspect the mirror was moved that night, perhaps to a hiding place nearby. Mr. Voss's passion for the mirror makes him a person of interest. Might your men examine his room at the inn? Discreetly, of course." Craddock nodded, scribbling a note. "I'll get a warrant, though it's thin without more evidence. Anything specific we're looking for?" Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. "Papers, Inspector. Receipts, sketches, anything that speaks of planning. A collector plans his acquisitions, and this theft was no impulse." Craddock departed, promising to report back by evening. Dolly sank onto the sofa, her hands fluttering. "Jane, you're so calm. Do you really think Voss carted the mirror off? But where would he hide it?" Miss Marple's needles clicked as she resumed her knitting. "Not far, Dolly. A mirror so large cannot travel easily, even by cart. A barn, a shed, perhaps a cellar in the village. Voss's passion is a beacon, but Grayson's silence is a shadow. We must watch both." As the afternoon faded into dusk, Miss Marple's thoughts wove a pattern of clues: the wheel mark, the smudge, Voss's fervor, Grayson's cloth. Each was a thread in a tapestry she could almost see, and she knew from the quiet dramas of St. Mary Mead that the smallest trace could lead to the truth, like a path through the mist. Chapter 10. The Confrontation. The drawing-room of Ashfield Hall was steeped in the hushed expectancy of an autumn evening, its heavy velvet curtains drawn tight against the encroaching dark. The fire crackled in the grate, casting a warm glow over the polished furniture and the tense faces of those gathered within. Miss Jane Marple sat in her usual chair, her knitting needles silent for once, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her mild eyes, sharp behind their spectacles, surveyed the room with the quiet authority of one who sees beyond surfaces. The theft of the antique mirror had reached its climax, and she had requested the presence of all involved to lay bare the truth. Dolly Bantry stood by the hearth, her nervous energy barely contained as she adjusted a vase of chrysanthemums. "Jane, are you sure about this?" she whispered, glancing at the door. "Bringing them all together, it's like something out of a play. Arthur's in a state, but he trusts you." Miss Marple's smile was serene. "A play, Dolly, is not far from the truth. People perform their roles, but the script betrays them in the end. Let us see how our players fare when the curtain rises." The door opened, and Inspector Craddock entered, his notebook tucked under his arm, and a determined set to his jaw. Behind him came the suspects. Grayson, the butler, his posture rigid as ever, his face an unreadable mask. Mrs. Clara Wentworth, her black silk rustling, her eyes bright with curiosity. Miss Felicity Lyle, her auburn hair pinned haphazardly, her expression a mix of defiance and impatience. And Mr. Reginald Voss, his thin frame taut, his mustache twitching as he adjusted his tie with a faint smirk. Colonel Bantry followed, his face flushed with impatience. "Miss Marple, I hope this isn't a waste of time," he said gruffly, settling into an armchair. "The police have turned up nothing, and I'm half ready to call in Scotland Yard." Miss Marple's voice was gentle but firm. "Patience, Colonel. The mirror has not vanished into the ether. It is hidden, and its thief is among us. Let us begin." She rose, her small figure commanding the room's attention. "The mirror," she said, her tone clear and deliberate, "was a treasure, not just for its value, but for the desire it sparked. Its theft was no act of impulse, but a careful plan, executed with precision. The screw holes were undisturbed, the hallway silent, yet a scuff mark, a smudge of earth, and a wheel's trace in the mud tell a story. Someone in this house knew its secrets and used them." Grayson stood motionless, his hands clasped behind his back. Clara fidgeted with her handkerchief, her lips parted as if to speak. Felicity crossed her arms, her eyes narrowing. Voss's smirk widened, though his fingers betrayed a slight tremble. Miss Marple turned to Voss, her gaze steady. "Mr. Voss, you coveted the mirror for your private collection, did you not? Your passion for it was evident to all. You offered to buy it, were refused, and left the manor at 9:30. Yet I believe you returned, using a handcart to transport the mirror through the coal chute to a hiding place nearby." Voss's laugh was sharp, almost theatrical. "Absurd, Miss Marple. I was at the inn by 10, reading in my room. You have no proof of this fanciful tale." Miss Marple's smile did not waver. "Proof, Mr. Voss, is in the details. Inspector Craddock, with your permission, searched your room at the inn this afternoon. He found a receipt for a handcart rented the day before the theft, and sketches of the mirror hidden in your suitcase. The mud on your carpet matched the village lane, and your walking stick's worn tip aligns with marks near the stables." Craddock stepped forward, producing a folded paper. "It's true, sir. The receipt is dated, and the sketches show the mirror's exact dimensions. We also found a key to a barn on the village outskirts, leased under your name." Voss's smirk faltered, his eyes darting to the door. "This is preposterous. Those sketches are for my work. I catalog antiques. The cart was for moving crates, not mirrors. You can't prove I was here after 9:30. Miss Marple's voice was soft but relentless. "The gardener, Tompkins, heard footsteps on the lane near 10, Mr. Voss. You claimed solitude, but the wheel mark near the stables and the smudge by the coal chute tell a different story. You returned, using the service corridor's quiet path. The mirror was removed with care, its screws undone with a tool you carried, and transported on a cart you had prepared." Clara gasped, her handkerchief pressed to her lips. "Oh, Mr. Voss, how could you?" Felicity snorted, her arms still crossed. "I told you he was obsessed. All that talk about cherishing it sounds like a thief to me." Grayson remained silent, his eyes fixed on the floor, but Miss Marple turned to him. "Mr. Grayson, you were in the hallway at 9 with a tray, and again near 10 with a cloth, as Ellen saw. You claimed to be polishing silver, but I suspect you were wiping the mirror's frame, perhaps to remove traces of its removal. You knew the house's paths, yet you said nothing. Why? Grayson's face tightened, but his voice was steady. I polished no mirror, ma'am. I was tending to my duties. If I saw nothing, it's because there was nothing to see. Miss Marple's eyes softened. Your silence is your shield, Mr. Grayson, but it does not hide you entirely. The scuff mark in your room matches the hallways, a sign of something heavy moved with care. Yet I believe you acted under duress, or perhaps loyalty to another. Your fiancé's loss weighs on you, does it not? Grayson's hands clenched, but he said nothing. Miss Marple turned, back to the room. Mrs. Wentworth heard a sound like wind, but it was the creak of a cart's wheel. Miss Lyle saw the mirror at 9, gleaming under the chandelier, but by 10, it was gone. The pattern is clear. Mr. Voss planned the theft, using the coal chute and a handcart, and hid the mirror in a barn he leased. Voss's face paled, his voice rising. This is conjecture. You've no witness, no proof I touched that mirror. Miss Marple's gaze was unwavering. The barn, Mr. Voss, will tell its own story. Inspector Craddock, have your men searched it yet? Craddock nodded. We're heading there now, Miss Marple. The key was enough to justify a look. Colonel Bantry stood, his voice booming. Good Lord, Voss, if you've got my mirror stashed away, I'll see you in court. Voss's composure cracked, his hands trembling openly. I only wanted to protect it, he stammered. It was wasted here, gathering dust. I meant to keep it safe, to cherish it. Miss Marple's voice was gentle but firm. Beauty, Mr. Voss, does not justify theft. You saw the mirror as yours, but it belongs to Ashfield Hall. Your passion betrayed you, as passion often does. As Craddock led Voss away, the room erupted in murmurs. Clara's eyes were wide with excitement, Felicity's expression smug, and Grayson's face unreadable. Dolly clutched Miss Marple's arm. Jane, you've done it, but how did you know? Miss Marple's smile was serene. People, Dolly, leave trails as surely as carts do. Mr. Voss's heart was in his eyes, and his eyes were on the mirror. Chapter 11. The Confession. The air in the drawing-room of Ashfield Hall hung heavy with the aftermath of Miss Marple's revelations, the fire's glow casting long shadows that seemed to dance with the weight of truth uncovered. The suspects remained, their faces a tableau of shock, relief, and lingering unease. Mr. Reginald Voss stood near the hearth, his thin frame slumped, the bravado of his earlier denials replaced by a pallor that betrayed his defeat. Inspector Craddock stood poised, his notebook open, ready to escort Voss to the waiting police car, but Miss Marple's gentle voice held the room in a quiet thrall, as if the final threads of the mystery were yet to be tied. Dolly Bantry, her hands clasped tightly, leaned toward Miss Marple, her voice a whisper. Jane, is it truly settled? Voss admitted it, but it feels so sudden. Are you sure there's nothing more? Miss Marple's eyes, bright behind her spectacles, held a serene certainty. The truth, Dolly, is like a mirror. It reflects clearly when the dust is swept away. Mr. Voss's confession is the heart of it, but let us hear him fully. A man's reasons often reveal more than his actions. She turned to Voss, whose hands trembled as he gripped the mantelpiece, his mustache no longer a proud flourish, but a drooping emblem of his unraveling composure. Mr. Voss, she said, her tone soft, yet unyielding. You said you wished to protect the mirror, to cherish it. Tell us why you felt such a treasure belonged to you alone. Voss's eyes darted to the faces around him, Clara Wentworth's wide-eyed fascination, Felicity Lyle's smug satisfaction, Grayson's impassive silence, and Colonel Bantry's barely restrained indignation. He drew a shaky breath, his voice low but clear. "I couldn't bear it, Miss Marple. That mirror, French Regency, a masterpiece of craftsmanship, was wasted in this house, hung in a drafty hallway, dusted by careless hands, seen by no one who understood its soul. I've spent my life collecting beauty, preserving it. When Bantry refused my offer, I saw no other way." Miss Marple's needles, retrieved from her bag, began their familiar click, a soothing counterpoint to the tension. "And so you planned its theft," she said, not accusingly, but with the calm of one stating a fact. "You rented a handcart, studied the house's quiet paths, and chose the coal chute for its secrecy. But how did you manage it alone?" Voss's shoulders sagged, his voice barely above a whisper. "It wasn't easy. I left at 9:30, as I said, but I lingered in the village, watching the house. I knew Grayson's routine, locking up at 10. I returned through the service corridor, using a key I'd borrowed from a servant months ago, when I first visited Ashfield Hall. The mirror was heavy, but I'd practiced with the cart. I unscrewed the frame carefully, wrapped it in a cloth to muffle any sound, and eased it through the coal chute. The cart carried it to a barn I'd leased on the village outskirts. I meant to take it to London, to my collection, where it would be safe." Clara gasped, her handkerchief fluttering. "A key. Oh, how deceitful! And to think we dined with you!" Felicity snorted, her arms crossed. "All that talk about galleries, and you were just a common thief. I told you it belonged in a museum, not your attic." Grayson's face remained unreadable, but his fingers twitched, as if restraining a response. Colonel Bantry's voice boomed, his face red. "You scoundrel, Voss! That mirror's a Bantry heirloom now. You'll answer for this." Miss Marple raised a hand, her gesture calming the room. "Mr. Voss's actions were misguided, Colonel, but his passion was genuine, if warped. The barn, Inspector Craddock. Have your men found the mirror?" Craddock nodded, his expression grim but satisfied. "They're there now, Miss Marple. The key from Voss's room led us to a barn off the village lane. The mirror's there, wrapped in canvas, undamaged. We'll have it back by morning." Dolly clapped her hands, her relief palpable. "Oh, Jane, you've done it. Arthur, it's coming back." Miss Marple's smile was gentle. "The mirror is found, Dolly, but we must tie the loose ends. Mr. Grayson, you were in the hallway near 10, with a cloth, as Ellen saw. You claimed to be polishing silver, yet the mirror's frame was your task, was it not?" Grayson's eyes flickered, a rare crack in his composure. "I wiped the frame, ma'am, to remove dust. I saw no theft, no cart. If I was near the hallway, it was my duty to check the house." Miss Marple's gaze was steady. "Duty, Mr. Grayson, is a noble thing, but silence can serve another. Did you see Mr. Voss return? Or did you, perhaps, suspect and choose to look away?" Grayson's jaw tightened, his voice low. "I saw nothing, ma'am. I locked the house as always. If I missed something, it was my failing, not intent." Miss Marple nodded, her eyes softening. "I believe you, Mr. Grayson. Your silence was not complicity but caution. A man with a loss like yours guards his heart closely." Clara, unable to resist, leaned forward. "But, Miss Marple, what about that sound I heard? The wind, I thought, but you said it was a cart." Miss Marple's needles clicked steadily. "Indeed, Mrs. Wentworth, your wind was the creak of Mr. Voss's cart moving through the service corridor. You saw Grayson, but not Voss, who was careful to stay in the shadows. Miss Lyle, your sketches kept you in the library, but your eye for detail confirmed the mirror's presence at 9, narrowing the time of the theft. Felicity shrugged, a grudging respect in her eyes. I suppose I helped then, but it was Voss's obsession that gave him away. Miss Marple's smile was serene. Obsession, Miss Lyle, is a mirror of its own, reflecting the heart's desires. Mr. Voss saw only the mirror's beauty, not the wrong of taking it. Voss, his head bowed, spoke softly. I meant no harm to the Bantries. I only wanted to save it from neglect. I'm sorry. Craddock stepped forward, his voice firm. You'll have time to reflect on that, Mr. Voss. Let's go. As the inspector led Voss from the room, the tension eased, replaced by a murmur of relief. Colonel Bantry shook Miss Marple's hand, his gruffness softened by gratitude. You've saved the day, Miss Marple. I don't know how you do it, but I'm dashed glad you did. Dolly clutched her friend's arm. Jane, you're a marvel, but how did you know it was Voss, not Grayson or someone else? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled. People, Dolly, are like books. Their covers may deceive, but their pages tell the truth. Voss's passion was written in every glance, every word. The cart, the mud, the key. They were his story's end. As the room emptied, Miss Marple sat quietly. Her knitting resumed. The mirror would return, its reflection restored, but she knew the human heart was a mirror far harder to polish. Chapter 12. The mirror restored. The morning sun broke through the mist over St. Mary Mead, bathing the village in a golden light that seemed to promise renewal. Ashfield Hall stood serene, its stone facade warmed by the dawn, as if the recovery of the antique mirror had lifted a shadow from its walls. Miss Jane Marple sat in the drawing-room, her knitting needles moving with their familiar rhythm, a pale blue scarf growing steadily in her lap. The fire crackled softly, and the scent of fresh coffee mingled with the faint perfume of chrysanthemums, arranged by Dolly Bantry in a burst of relieved enthusiasm. Dolly bustled in, her face alight with a joy that had been absent for days. "Jane, it's back," she exclaimed, clapping her hands. "The mirror's in the hallway again, not a scratch on it. The police brought it from that wretched barn this morning, and Arthur's strutting about like he hung it himself. You must come see it." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, her eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. "I'm delighted, Dolly. A treasure restored is a rare joy. But let us linger here a moment. I'd like to hear how the household has taken the news." Dolly sank onto the sofa, pouring coffee with a flourish. "Oh, it's like a weight's lifted. Arthur's grumbling less, though he's still muttering about lawsuits against Voss. Grayson's back to his silent efficiency, polishing everything in sight. Clara Wentworth's already writing letters to her friends in London, making it sound like she solved the mystery herself. And Felicity Lyle? Well, she sniffed and said the mirrors still hung too low, but I think she's secretly pleased." Miss Marple's needles clicked, a soothing counterpoint to Dolly's chatter. "And Mr. Voss? Has he said more since last night?" Dolly's expression sobered. "He's with the police, Jane. Inspector Craddock says he's cooperating, though he keeps insisting he only wanted to save the mirror. They found papers in his room, letters to a dealer in London, hinting at selling the mirror abroad. Can you imagine? All that fuss for his private collection." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts drifting to the collector's fervent confession. "Passion, Dolly, is a dangerous lens. It magnifies beauty but distorts right and wrong. Mr. Voss saw the mirror as his destiny, not Colonel Bantry's property. Such blindness is not uncommon, I'm afraid. Colonel Bantry strode in, his face ruddy with satisfaction. "Miss Marple, you're a marvel," he boomed, shaking her hand with vigor. "That mirror's back where it belongs, and I owe you a debt. Dinner tonight, you must stay. None of this slipping back to your cottage. We'll have a proper celebration." Miss Marple's smile was warm but modest. "You're too kind, Colonel. I only followed the threads others left behind. A village, like a house, hides little from those who look closely." As they spoke, Grayson entered, carrying a tray with a decanter of sherry and glasses. His movements were as precise as ever, but Miss Marple noted a faint softening in his eyes, as if the resolution of the theft had eased some inner burden. "Sherry, ma'am?" he asked, offering her a glass. "Thank you, Mr. Grayson," she said, accepting it with a nod. "You've weathered this storm admirably. It cannot be easy, managing a house under such scrutiny." Grayson's face remained impassive, but his voice held a trace of warmth. "My duty, ma'am. The house is restored, and that's what matters." As he withdrew, Dolly leaned closer. "Jane, you were so gentle with Grayson last night, even when you thought he might know something. Do you still suspect he was involved?" Miss Marple sipped her sherry, her gaze thoughtful. "Not involved, Dolly, but aware, perhaps in a fleeting way. His silence was his shield, protecting a heart scarred by loss. He saw no theft, but he may have sensed a shadow in the house. I believe he is honest, if guarded." The conversation turned to lighter matters, and soon Colonel Bantry led them to the hallway to admire the mirror's return. It hung once more between the stern portraits, its gilded frame catching the sunlight in a dance of golden flecks. The glass was flawless, reflecting the hall's grandeur and the faces of those who stood before it. Miss Marple paused, her eyes tracing the frame's delicate carvings. "A beautiful piece," she murmured. "But beauty, like truth, is best when shared, not hoarded." Dolly sighed, her hand resting on Miss Marple's arm. "You've a way of seeing through things, Jane. I don't know how you do it. Scuff marks, mud, a walking stick. It's like magic." Miss Marple's laugh was soft, almost musical. "No magic, Dolly, only observation. People are like mirrors. They reflect what they wish you to see, but the truth lies in the edges, where the polish wears thin. Mr. Voss's edges were his passion, his cart, his key. They framed his guilt as clearly as this mirror frames the hall." Colonel Bantry clapped his hands, his voice hearty. "Well, you've framed it perfectly, Miss Marple. Now, about that dinner, 7 o'clock, and no excuses." Miss Marple inclined her head, her smile gracious. "I wouldn't dream of refusing, Colonel. A village celebration is a rare treat." As they returned to the drawing-room, Miss Marple's thoughts lingered on the mirror, its reflection now a symbol of order restored. Yet she knew, from the quiet dramas of St. Mary Mead, that order was fragile, and human hearts were ever prone to wander. She resumed her knitting, the scarf lengthening with each steady stitch, and mused on the next mystery that might ripple through the village's calm. For in St. Mary Mead, as in life, another reflection was never far away.